Hello and welcome to another episode of the CG Garage. This is episode number 359, featuring my long-lost friend, Peter Baustaedter, who is a VFX art director over in New Zealand. He is now, I think he's been a Kiwi for quite a while, actually. He and I worked at Digital Domain for quite a while. Actually, not a while ago, shall we say. We were both on Day After Tomorrow, but we talk a little bit about that. But he has a fantastic and interesting past and a fantastic and interesting future as well. Kristen, what do you think about Peter? And what do you think of this podcast?
Yeah, this is a great one. Like, his background is amazing, and he's like an amazing matte painter. But he's kind of had a wild ride with his career, and actually moving to America is what kind of changed the game. I think he said he was an intern starting off at DD and kind of like bounced around there and then moved along to Square Hawaii and then Weta. So he's been all over the world, and now he's back in New Zealand, and worked on like Fifth Element, Titanic, Lord of the Rings, Two Towers, and then you guys met on Day After Tomorrow. But yeah, the entire podcast, you just kind of get a lot of great information. And I saw that he has a VES award for outstanding matte painting in a feature motion picture for Avatar. So yeah.
Yep, he does. And
Awesome.
We actually talk about Avatar and how it was done and sort of how they didn't really want to do matte paintings for Avatar. They wanted to be everything in CG. And then they, at the end, they're like, well, maybe we need to go to matte paintings here and there. But it was kind of interesting to do that. I mean, like you said, Peter is a very fascinating person. I knew him as, a lead matte painter, definitely at DD, and he was a great guy there. He's now actually become a VFX art director, as I mentioned earlier, and he's doing a lot of interesting things, figuring out how to sort of art direct VFX. And he's working on a major project over at Amazon Studios right now, which is kind of interesting as well. He couldn't quite tell us as much, but I think you guys will figure out some of the cool stuff that he's doing. So very interesting, very excited to talk to Peter, and it was really great catching up with him. And so thank you so much, Peter Baustaedter, for being on. All right, so we don't have any real announcements. There's one big news item that we want to talk about, and that is that I know that a lot of people have been asking questions about the recent merger that Chaos is going with Enscape, and we are going to basically try to get a podcast on this. So Chris and I have been working hard, scheduling the appropriate people, but as you can imagine, when two companies are trying to figure out how the merger is working, their time becomes limited. So we are trying to find the best slot of time to record it, and we will try to release that podcast episode as soon as possible to help answer any of those questions. If you guys have specific questions that you guys want to ask about the merger, or you need to ask those, please let us know. So, and if people want to do that, Kristen, how can they get in touch with us?
All right, a few ways. So you can go to facebook.com/CG Garage Podcast. You can go to chaos.com/CG Garage. And if you'd like to watch us, you can go to youtube.com/Chaos Group TV. And the email, if you want to say it,
it's labs@chaosgroup.com. Don't forget to email us there if you want to just do a direct question to us. That's a great way to reach us. Again, that's labs@chaosgroup.com. And while you're there and you've got your browser open or whatever you're listening to this podcast, make sure and give us a rating and a review. And if you're on Apple Podcasts, we'd appreciate one there, and make sure and share us with all of your friends. But for now, please enjoy episode number 359 with Peter Baustaedter.
Welcome to another CG Garage, where the Chaos Group talks. You'll know it's over when the last bucket drops. We're gonna fire off rays in high dynamic range. We know that ambient occlusion is passé. Global illumination won't lead you astray. And while image-based lighting is really swell, you need to make sure everything has Fresnel.
How you been?
Good. It's been a while, huh?
Almost 20 years?
I think it's been exactly 20 years.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I think last week Cross Paths was on Day After Tomorrow, if I remember correctly.
Yep. So that was 2002 was, I guess. Yeah. So it was, yeah. So there you go.
I think it was 2003 because 2002 I was in New Zealand for Two Towers.
Oh, right.
Came back and went on that crazy ride.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Well, we're going to get to that in a second. So we're going to dissect your amazing history and the things you've done. But let's start with some of the backstory and let's find out there. So what got you interested in films and doing the kind of things that you do? Because I've known you as a matte painter. That's what I was known you as when you were on Day After Tomorrow. Again, that was 20 years ago. So a lot's changed between now and then, which we'll get to that. But I want to see the journey that led from where you were in the past to where we met, and then we can go from that point forward.
Absolutely, yeah. Well, I never thought it would end up in film, like many of us, I guess. It somehow happens. I remember reading the credits, especially the visual effects credits, for some reason, in the VHS days when we were all watching Aliens for the 27th time and whatever else.
Right.
And I'd never imagined actually meeting some of those people whose names I read much later. But I come mostly, I guess, from computer graphics. That was the fueling interest, was just being able to do computer graphics. Being also growing up in the 80s, more or less, like probably the same generation, like first generation home computer and all that.
Yep.
So I grew up with, my first machine was a VIC-20 with 3.8 kilobytes of RAM, which is as long as an angry email, I guess.
Yeah.
And then I got a Commodore 64.
Oh, yeah.
And with that first, like everybody, I played games, but I remember being sick one day at home, and I'd seen this paint program. I'm like, well, I got nothing to do. I check that out. So I had my little black and white television next to the bed, and the machine propped up just also on the chair, and with the joystick, I was painting, and that was for me the moment. I'm like, I can paint on the television. I can paint with light. It's amazing. And I mean, I'd always been drawing and all that, but for me, being able to create a self-illuminated image, so to say, was amazing. And I also remember I used a black and white television, really like an orange 70s television. That was my small television I had. Right. To paint on there, and later on, I looked at the big color television, what I had painted, and I remember I had just used the grayscale values of all the colors. So when I looked at it in color, it was completely messed up because I used, red and green as different grayscales. So it turned out a mess. But that was the start, and there was no stopping then. There was
so this had to be what, 1984 or 5?
No, a little bit later. I got my VIC-20 in 84, and then got my 64 in 85.
Yeah.
So it was 85.
Okay.
It took me a while to nag my parents enough to make this considerable investment.
Well, yeah, and where were you at the time?
Austria.
In Austria.
So I'm an Austrian, and have now been away from Austria for more than half my life.
Yeah.
But anyway, that was in Austria, and Austria and Germany, and all that area was quite Commodore 64 heavy. Mm-hmm. And later on, then that led me straight to the Amiga, which is also a machine that our generation was really influential. So I made one game on the 64 when I was like 15, that I sold with a friend, and we sold. We said we're gonna make money. We're not gonna sell it for fixed price, but we want to be cutting in the profits, and it sold like 4 times.
Okay.
So we didn't really get rich, but it was a great experience, and that led into the Amiga, and there was a movement in Europe at that time, which was called the cracker scene. Where people would crack software that they developed into the so-called demo scene. Right. And I was right in there. That was me and my friends, and there were a few modems, but phones in Austria were so expensive that if I would have hooked up a modem, my mom would have made me live in the forest. Right. And so we sent everything by mail. So every week my mailbox would be chock full with envelopes filled with 3.5-inch floppies. and that's how we exchanged, those demos. And
explain the demo scene, because the demo scene is kind of an interesting thing. I mean, I know what it is. I think it's fascinating, and it was definitely big back then. But explain to people what a demo was at that time.
Yeah, it developed fairly. I think it was in Germany and then also Scandinavia, but basically the first crackers in Europe showed up in Germany. And what they did is they removed the copy production from games, and in order to put their graffiti and their signature on, like, haha, I removed this, they made what were called little intros, like cracked by GCS, German cracking service.
Right.
And over time, those intros became more and more elaborate, because not only were the crackers, there were also really capable coders.
Right.
And there was, in one time, that intro split off from being in front of a cracked program, but became a standalone demonstration of skills. And that really went big on the Amiga then. So
yeah.
I did graphics, and I always worked with a coder. I can't code, of course, but I knew enough back then to have them not get angry when I made my graphics 35 pixels wide instead of 32.
Yeah.
And all that stuff.
But they still have those demo guys still are working, like now. They have the 64K challenge and how much they can do in 64K of memory or whatever,
Yeah, there's actually 4 kilobyte challenges too, and it's amazing what those guys are aliens.
Yeah.
What they can pack into 4 kilobytes. And yeah, those demos are still around.
Uh-huh.
There are, I think what made it interesting were the restrictions of the machines back then, and I've always been very tickled by that too. It's like when I switched from the Commodore 64 to the Amiga, I'm like, oh my god, I'm getting 32 colors out of 4096 instead of 3 out of 16.
Right.
Which now is completely irrelevant. That's why there are those artificial barriers like 4 kilobyte and 64 kilobytes. There are also graphics competitions, which says like you can use a total of 512 pixels in whatever aspect ratio,
right,
and stuff like that. So and also pixel graphics kind of had a renaissance, I guess, and I'm still doing it myself.
Mm-hmm.
Also, when I'm away for a job and all that, I sometimes pack an Amiga with me, and in a hotel room or whatever, it's very, it's a good meditation.
Wow, you still have an Amiga that you work with, huh?
I have my original 2000 that my dad, bless him, sent from Austria, and after 30 years, I just checked it because there are batteries in there that were buffering the real-time clock that after 15 years start leaking and ruined many computers. So I was lucky mine leaked, but I could clean it up, turned it on. My boot menu came up, the 42 megabyte hard drive still worked, and I saw that as like last, I think 1992, I had made my own little boot menu with my tools, and it still runs. And then I started collecting stuff too. So I've got a VIC-20 again. I'm getting that age.
Well, I see the Moog behind you. Are those a couple of Moogs behind you?
Oh, those are, let's see here. Those are Korg MS-20 and MS-10. They are like semi-modular synths. Also, I'm a real child of the 80s. So I sell synthesizers. If you look a little bit further,
see
that's
the Mac. I see the Commodore.
Yeah. And exactly, so there you go. quickly pulling my pants down here. Yeah. My geek pants.
Yeah.
And so yeah, that's where I kind of really got into. I mean, I was obsessed, like we all were. I guess our generation of getting into this business, we just couldn't help each other.
Yeah.
And there was really my mission. So I was in that European demo scene and made logos and traveled to copy parties up in Sweden, that far away. And then there are still people that are my friends to this day. And now with Facebook, there are communities reuniting and various 8-bit veterans clubs that sprung up. And yeah, so it's for me, there was a really important and informative time. Of course, completely wild grown. You know, you just also the Amiga was such a great machine that kind of spoke to me. It's like, what do you want to do? Do you want to do graphics?
Right.
Do you want to do music? And it was a creative Hoover in a way that I willingly jumped right into. And after that time, I always was also motivated by new hardware with new capabilities in a way. So I didn't really stick with games. If I had, I guess I would be a multiple millionaire these days. But I went and worked at a company in Austria that had first I had a video post-production to just get into this. And I remember I worked on a Quantel video paint box from 1982. It was like as big as a fridge. Every time you did a cutout just in video resolution, you heard the hard drive go tuk, 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 and save out that little cutout. And it had a huge Wacom cable pen graphics tablet. It was pressure sensitive.
Right.
Not that great, but it was all there.
Yeah.
And you could save out stuff on 8-inch floppy.
Yep.
Or what we did our backups on pneumatic tape, just on as a tape backup, and then I fairly quickly switched to the neighboring company, which was called Vienna Paint. They were one of the few companies that had a Quantel graphic paint box running, or two actually, which were hardware behemoths, like also two massive fridges, one filled with print boards. Like it's an airbrush processor on one whole, more than LP sized print board, and the other one was hard drives. I think we almost had a gigabyte. I think it was like 800 megabytes of it was split, and there was a hard drive array of about 800 megs, and it had a Sony high definition monitor attached to it that was deeper as it was wide. But I remember when it had an amazing image. That was an enormous and brilliant piece of kit. And there was a whole drawer you could pull out, and the technician would align the grill to the magnetic field of the Earth because it was so big you would get color hits otherwise. So, and that was my first real professional foray. And I'm still thankful to my bosses back then, Andreas and Albert. That worked on an international standard back then. So we did, it was mostly advertising, but we did a Swatch campaign, we did Audi, it was really big stuff.
Right.
And they were insane enough to, or no, I should say it like this, they were generous enough to take little insane 21-year-old me on and had me work. But I guess my enthusiasm just kicked their doors open, and they really showed me the ropes in a way of what it means to work in a production workflow. And you know, when I did well, I got a pat, and if I messed up, I get a kick in the behind. And that's what I needed. I'm still friends with both of them, and really thankful that they gave me the chance.
Yeah, that's amazing. And those you're always thankful to those guys, right? Because those are the ones that sort of got you to where you are, and so you always have to think back to those times.
Yeah, and also, you know, looking back, when I look at my 21-year-old self, I'm like, how can I say, I was not insane, but I was just so exuberant and overly enthusiastic. I don't know what I would do with myself. So I'm like, thanks, guys. I'm sure it was sometimes difficult.
Yeah.
But yeah, thank you.
Yep.
So,
you were very enthusiastic. Well, you still are. I remember when you back in 2000. So, but okay.
Oh dear. Yeah.
All right. So you were still as this was in Vienna, I'm assuming.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. I'd moved to Vienna.
Yeah.
And worked there. And then we can go on. I had to go to the army because the army is compulsory.
Right.
In Austria, still is. And so it kind of took me out of that job, and I was I 22, 23 when that happened. So I couldn't push it any further. If there's like no way to weasel it out, and why would you? If it's compulsory, everybody does it.
Right.
And while I was still in it, that was 8 months, and while I was finishing up, I asked again if I could join, and there was a bit of shift in business, and they said, well, not really right now. So I was like, what would I do? And my dad was a journalist for a daily newspaper, and one of his colleagues was good friends with Arnold, and for some reason, I kind of made the connection because I had read about Digital Domain. I'm like, okay, so Stan Winston owns a part of this, and I know that actually Werner, our friend, knows Stan because Arnold and Stan were, I think, quite close.
Right.
And in my youthful enthusiasm again, I just said, well, maybe, I put my portfolio in an envelope and said, Werner was going to the States again for the premiere of, I think it was Junior, and I said, if you can, just maybe you can leave my portfolio at Stan's. He's like, Peter, I'll do that. No worries.
So you gave your portfolio to Arnold Schwarzenegger to give it to Stan.
To our friend who also knows Stan. But that's the connection. Yeah,
okay.
Through Arnold, he knew Stan, and he said, no, when I'm there for the premiere, leave it with Stan, or with his office,
right.
Not with Stan.
Sure.
And I mean, long shots, crazy, yeah.
Sure. But why not?
Exactly that, and so. He flew away, and I was still in the army, and then he came back and said, Stan wasn't there, but his assistant, Barbara, promised he would look at it. I'm like, well, that's already, was one of the names I read in those credits.
Right.
That they actually will look at my stuff is amazing.
Right.
And then I waited, and my mom called me a couple of weeks later and said, Peter, there's a fax, do you remember those?
Yeah, a fax.
Nice. From America. And it was actually this long, and it says, Dear Peter, this is Digital Domain. It was actually from Scott Ross, and
nice.
said, sorry, Stan sent us your portfolio, and really nice, and basically, long writing short, if you pay for everything yourself, you can become an intern. Best regards, Scott Ross. And I sold everything.
Okay.
With the little things I have, my Macintosh back then and whatever, right. I completely liquidated my existence, and in January 13th, 1995, I think I arrived in Los Angeles, never having been in the United States whatsoever. I just went there.
Right.
And then I was at the airport, and another friend of my dad's, another Austrian, he lived over there, and I was really, my path, especially in the early days, has been accompanied by really generous people, and he just took me under his wings, and I said, no, you stay at my apartment, and then we'll find you one, and I found an apartment just upstairs, so that was all easy, and I started becoming an intern. And I remember I scouted out DD before I actually started and looked in, and there were some monitors from the outside, just on rows. Yep. I looked in, and there was no fence back there, and those metal louvers were open, and then I think I was on the 15th. I was just boom there, and still jet lagged. Was there, and I don't know, you remember Lori Dreischmeyer?
Yeah.
She was basically the first person I met at DD, and said, make your login here and all this, and signed me in, and then she said, let's see where they are. So somebody said, they're in the screening room. So we went across the parking lot to the little bunker,
Yep.
And I remember I was walking in, it was completely pitch black, and from the sun I couldn't see anything. And I somehow ended up looking at the screen, and they were working on Apollo 13 and on the stage separation. It was Caleb Howard's big separation flames, and that was the first thing I saw on the screen. And it was like, I'm here. I have arrived. That was a really cool moment.
Yeah.
And that was my start.
That's amazing.
So then the lights went up, and Karen was there, and she's like, "So what can you do?"
Right.
And got strapped in and started working on Apollo.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice.
And
you started as a matte painter? Is that what you were doing, or?
not really. Not really. I did everything, which was so great back in the days too. Now it's the return of the generalist, you know. But back then, everybody was a generalist, you know. They were all, because everybody's interests, I guess, were so wide.
Right.
And that I started. I knew how to scan because the job at Vienna Paint was a print job, so I had quite a bit of experience working scanning gear and all that. I remember scanning this nice 6x7 prints of the moon that had a resolution. For back then, I scanned them in 4K, and there was still detail in there, and retouched those. So I did a bit of everything, and did a bit of roto. That, you know, just worked my way in, because I didn't even really. Oh, well, I knew about matte painting, I guess, but for me, I paint pictures. You know, that kind of was what I came with. And I also wanted to say that back then it was quite different than now in as that everybody that congregated in Los Angeles, that was the only place to do high-end computer graphics. I guess, you know, some people might beg to differ, but if you really wanted to go all the way, there was in the mid-90s, there was Los Angeles, especially for features. So it made for really, it's still, I mean, that was the spirit of DD that you also experienced of people that were of a certain attitude and passion, and we all kind of met there, which was amazing. And then also joined by people like Price Bethel, you know, like really the people that laid the floor that we were working on, or not laid the floor, but invented the floor, I should say it like this. That's more, and several other people. So yeah, I didn't even realize what I had walked into back then. I was just so like, oh yeah, I'll do stuff that I had no idea how important that actually was, or how foundational, you know. And I was a tiny little speck that the wind had blown in there. Right. So,
but I mean, 1995. That was still the early days of DD, right? So
it was. I always like to think of it. It was the end of the pioneer days in a way, and the beginning of how would you say that, like commercial computer graphics in a way, where it was not so much an exploration anymore, but still, I mean, it's always an exploration, but not like, I'm not sure if this is gonna work, you know, and let's just plug this in and try to write some code on that machine. I think it was just the end of that. There was still custom codes and all coding and all that, but it turned commercial in a way. But I still got, I guess, the last breeze of those pioneer days. And yeah, quite exciting. Also, there were a lot of people with traditional backgrounds still, you know, in that transitional time, and film outs, and I remember for Apollo, it was Chris. He was a VFX camera guy. I forgot his last name. Everybody was also super generous to Curious Me, and I would just pop up and ask. And they're like, yeah, no, this is a matte box, and because we can't really get the rocket fire to glow in the machine, so what they did is they built a rephotography box where they had a monitor on one side and a camera on the other side, and they would put some pro-mist filters in between and film that, scan it, and then, you know, Brian Grill or whoever would carefully, or I think it was Brian Grill or Pablo Hellman, would carefully, you know, kiss the glow on top, and it looked like $1 million. Yeah. Yep. And a lot of miniature work too, you know, just with Mr. Legato. Yeah. And all spun up with Eric Nash. Yeah. Being his cameraman. That was amazing.
Did you work on Titanic too as well?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
I remember when they did the start of the Apollo or Saturn V engines.
Uh-huh.
It was shot in high speed. I think they shot at 240 frames per second.
Right.
And in slow motion, it looked great, but in real time, it was like, woof.
Right.
A big slow explosion, and it set off all the car alarms on, what was it, on 3rd, I think?
Uh-huh.
Was that street going across, just because of all the air that thing moved, just all the cars.
Yeah, you
went
did
off.
that in miniature, right? So, yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
And also, I loved walking across the parking lot at DD, and you'd look down and you see all the holes from the rigging they just hammered in the parking lot there.
Yeah.
When we also worked on Dante's Peak,
Yeah.
and I think we burned stuff, so you had burn stands on it, and there was chain reaction.
Yeah.
Was this hydrogen explosion that picks up a truck, and had a big gantry in the parking lot where they dropped the truck towards camera, and that was a huge setup, and so that was, for me, was super exciting as little Austrian,
Yeah.
fresh off the boat, to see all this.
Yeah.
I remember one time they shot an explosion in the tunnel for chain reaction, and they actually were so nice, and to walk through a digital building, it's like, we're gonna shoot this, you want to watch, and went in, and you're like, okay, if there's a fire, run out this way, and here are your plugs, and if not going, nobody move. We're like, okay, it was all exciting, and we couldn't, there was just a tunnel miniature, and the camera was inside, so they said, okay, it's like, go hot, and camera rolls, woo, heard it spin up, and then action, and something just, I think, inside fell over, like, and nothing happened.
Right.
It just didn't go off, and they had to reset for a whole day, and then
Right.
it worked, and it looked fantastic.
Yeah.
And also the miniature shop,
Oh, yeah.
This was there were some really, especially for Apollo, and also for all the other shows, there was such great people in there, and also so generous. You could walk in there and get like, hey, what are you doing?
Yep.
And they tell you, and those were the people, once again, whose names are read in those credits.
Yeah.
And so I consider myself really lucky to have arrived that early, and to have arrived at all. So
it's funny. What's funny, Peter, is that the way you're describing things is very much the way that it was for me, except that I was the younger guy, in 2001 or whatever, and you were the experienced guy who was showing me around and telling me all this stuff. It's kind of funny that you did the same thing for me when I was at that, so around 2001, 2002, 2002 is when I started, I think, at DD. And you were like, yeah, you were the one who were taking me to the model shop and showing me the stuff. And I was like, this is amazing.
Oh, that's okay. I love doing this because it was such a great experience for me too, and and that's something you really don't see often. I don't see anymore now. So I'm glad I did this.
Yeah.
And I was passing this, paying it forward in a way, or passing this on.
Yeah.
As long as we could.
That's for
Did
sure.
we do Time Machine then?
Yeah, Time Machine was
we did
just
Time Machine-
before I got there. So I started on Day After Tomorrow. So
Really, because I thought we did the Powers of 10 shot in Time Machine, because you were the person, my architect friend, that explained the term parapet to me.
Oh,
So
right.
whenever
Well, that's because we were doing the buildings on Day After Tomorrow, and I had to do all the parapets and stuff like that. That's right.
Really?
Yeah.
Who did for the life of me, I thought it was you.
It was Eric Hansen. Was Eric Hansen there? It was probably me.
Yes, of course. Yeah.
Yeah.
Great guy, man. So to quickly finish off, so
Yeah.
I came with Apollo 13 and stayed till Titanic. Yeah. So in between, I got to work a little bit with Mark Stetson on, wasn't credited, but on Fifth Element.
Yep.
Which I really have to say, Mark was also so generous and is so great to work with.
Yeah.
That's for the first time I really realized, maybe just from the artist side, but what makes a good supervisor, and how he explained things, and how he laid out the whole environment for you, that you could then answer your own questions. So he
Right.
didn't say, we want this green and all this. He's like, the reason why this looks is because those people have been here for 200 years and this, and told you all the stories. So that's something that I try to do now when I explain things to my artists, give context to get so much more back.
Yeah.
And just Mark really maybe it took me a while to realize it, but he was just generous with his time and really also I did the concept looking out of Zorg's office. The in the Fifth Element the O is like the round window, and there's a view out to Central Park. So that I was doing that, which was also very exciting. And then I did Dante's Peak, which I'm the volcanic knowledge I acquired there. I'm still using quite often, actually. Yeah. And that was quite exciting. And then we did Titanic. Yeah. And I did a bunch of skies. That was my first real matte painting, kind of, where I think I was credited as a matte painter. Yeah. Yeah. Awesome. And I think Charles Darby was there also as a fellow matte painter, and of course Snow Mac. Yeah. The incredible Snow Mac. Yep, she's great. And did that, yeah. So was Kevin working on Titanic too? I guess Kevin was too, right? No, I think did they do Dr. Moreau? Oh, he was doing Dr. Moreau. Yes, he was. He was definitely doing Dr. Moreau, because I've heard his stories and they're hilarious. There was, I also should mention Kevin is also one of the key people that really was so generous. Yeah. And with his knowledge and time and also back in the day we worked hard and we partied hard, so there was the whole group was great. There was also Teal, Matthew Butler, and John Court and Alfred Urrutia and many other people who my tired brain can tickle out right now. But it was really a very tight-knit group and a lovely way of working. When I came for Paul, there were only 40 people on the digital side. Wow. Yeah. Wow. It was a big flame room and then us spread out. That's amazing. Yeah. Okay, so you went to orphanage after DD? Is that you went to Weta for a little bit to work on Two Towers? Is that correct? Yeah. Quickly to insert this. After Titanic, I went to work on Final Fantasy Spirits Within. Oh, right. In Hawaii. At Square with at Square, yeah. Yeah. Okay. John, what's his name? Was up there. Who was there? I'm blanking. But anyway, you were in Hawaii. How was Hawaii? It was crazy. I was only there for 2 years. I kind of left. Yeah. A bit early. That's one of the few shows I left early. Okay. But it was just some personal things but Hawaii was amazing. Right. It was just, I remember sitting at the beach with also my friend Neville Spiteri was with us, and Steve Galley, if you remember. Yeah, him. Steve Galley. Andy Jones is who I was thinking of, was up there. Andy Jones, yes. Yeah. Andy came in and straightened everything out. Uh-huh. Yep. And just laying there on the beach, and it was like 26. I'm like, what am I doing here? Yeah. If somebody would have told me 4 years ago that I'd be in Hawaii, like living and working, I wouldn't have believed them. Yeah. So... that was a quite challenging project, but also quite pioneering. It takes people like Sakaguchi-san with the willingness and ambition to do things like that. Whereas they might not be, how can I say, the big hit that everybody hoped they would be, but from a trailblazing point of view, that was absolutely pivotal once again. Yeah. So that was quite the adventure. I will never forget my time there, and also great people, and it was quite amazing. Yeah. The servers had the nicest view of Honolulu, by the way. They were up on the 29th floor. Right. Because they had no other place to put them. Because, there was just... Square had the ambition, but also no experience of at first, So they just build it as we went along. I remember there was a really nice office building at the harbor side in downtown Honolulu, and it was the most modern building that they got, and we're up on the top floors. And once it brought in the service, there was quite a power pull. You know, we're still Silicon Graphics
Right.
service, but the building was almost not made to deliver that much power.
Yep.
So we were working away at noon, and all of a sudden, bam, everything went black. And they were running around and just didn't know what happened. And get the power up and running again after like 2 hours. And all good. Next day at noon again, bam, power went out. The surge was so hard that, you know, in a big building, they don't deliver the power by cable. They have big copper rails going up and
Right.
down the building.
Right.
And they were melting out of the spine of the building. Just
Wow.
they were desperate. They didn't know what happened, and it was so. I think it was only 2 power outages, but eventually they figured out that one of the Japanese artists has brought a little cooking plate with them.
Oh no.
and every day at noon he warmed up whatever, because you know that's why go out for lunch if you can just eat at your desk, and
Right.
just melted the copper out of the
Wow.
so
That's great. That's how close you guys were to the maximum power, to one plate.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah,
literally,
it was,
literally the straw on the camel's back. I mean, it's kind of hilarious.
exactly.
Yeah.
So yeah, and we were using also just to Maya version 0.96 or something
Right,
like that.
right, yep, yep.
It had just rolled in. Mm-hmm. So yeah, and then I came back in 99 and I joined Station X Studios. I don't know if you know those
Oh, yeah.
guys. Yeah, so it was Andy Lesniak
Yep.
and all the other Lightwave guys that started at DD.
Yep.
And also a great bunch of people, and yeah. really
Andy Mack
sad
was there
to-
too, I think, right? Was he part of Station X?
Maybe for a tiny bit, but I don't remember his
Yeah.
presence, to be honest.
Yeah.
So I couldn't exactly say, but yeah, it was sad to
And Mark Glazer was there. Was part of Station X.
Mark Glazer was there.
Yeah.
The only person that stayed behind, I guess, was Eric Barber of that group, and
Yeah.
then went then to forge his own path there. Good on him.
Yep.
And,
I worked
and so-
for Mark Glazer because I went to work for Sway after that, which was Mark Glazer's company. So
All right. Yeah. Yeah. Mark's a great guy.
Yeah. yeah. Okay, so you were at Station X for a little bit. What were you working on at Station X?
Most of a lot of commercials, I guess, and we did the intro for MechWarrior 3, which was a lot of fun because it was many services first directorial debut, so to say. Do you know Manny Service?
No.
He's also a multi-talent, a designer, animator, director, and he does his own. He did an animated movie. Many forgive me for not knowing the title. And now he's done a live action project, and he was the driving force behind that. And we also we got some helicopter cockpits and helmets and shot the pilot's live action, and I helped designing a bit of the environments and all that.
Right.
And that was good fun. And we also did the last shot of Deep Space Nine, I remember, ever. For the finale, I painted a little nebula, and Manny did a nice CG DS9, and so it was a company run by artists.
Yep.
That's, I think, why it wasn't around for long.
Yep.
With all due respect, they were all great people, really cream of the crop.
Yep.
And as long as it lasted, it was a really a nice time there. And then I came to DD, and I think that's kind of where we then started intersecting. Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
That's cool. And then you ended up at the orphanage for a little bit, I think, and then you at some point you ended up back at Weta, right? So how did you end up back in New Zealand?
yeah. What I did is I think I went DD, and then I went down for 2 towers, 6 months in New Zealand in 2002, which I'm like, oh, this is nice.
Uh-huh.
And it was a great experience. So, and then I came back for Day After Tomorrow, and once that kind of it was a difficult show. We all know. I mean that could fill like 2 episodes.
Oh, it already has.
Okay, yeah. I shall not deliver too much, but basically I decided to leave DD at that point, and kind of almost could say that they in the crates with the shots that went to the orphanage, they shoved me in there too,
right,
and shipped me to San Francisco. And the orphanage actually was a really great place. It was a matte painter's place. You know, it was the old Rebel Mac group that came from ILM.
Yep.
And Stu Masiewicz and all the other founders, they had a great sense how to use matte paintings. And for me, it was a really nice time. And I also got to meet for the first time Michael Pangrazio, who I'd always followed, of course, as an aspiring matte painter. And I remember my matte paintings, we all went to lunch, and there were a couple of other people and all that, and I sat next to this old bearded guy, sorry to call him like that, and he told, also Jet Green was there. I don't know if you know Carolyn Green.
Yeah.
Also super talented and lovely matte painter. And I knew who she was, but this guy kept talking to her, and then after he came back, my supervisor said, "Did you introduce yourself to Mike?" I'm like, "Mike is like was sitting next to you." I'm like, "Oh, so I'd been sitting next to Mike from Brazil, who I always wanted to meet without even noticing. Of course, that's very me."
Yeah.
And he'd only been back in business, I think, for 7 months.
Okay.
Because there was a time where he left Madware Digital and then did his own thing.
Right.
And came back. Brian Fleur brought him back.
Okay.
Because they had worked together before, and he was already working with Photoshop in a way that I didn't understand.
Right.
Very loose and very like his paintings, but he understood how to use Photoshop like a paintbrush more than I ever could hope to explore.
Right.
And I learned quite a bit from him. And after I finished up with Day After Tomorrow, what did I do? It's all a blur. I went a little bit freelance. I spent some time at Electronic Arts.
Okay.
But only 4 months, and I kind of realized it wasn't really for me.
Sure.
It wasn't. I liked the games in the pioneering days, but this was a bit different, and at least at that time, I didn't really gel with it, I guess.
Sure.
And then the orphanage called me back, and I worked on Sin City, which was also great.
Oh, nice.
That's where I got to work with Mike quite a bit, and we did little tabletop miniatures. We brought out the baking soda because there's a sequence where there's snow, and sprayed it with sugar water, and took a little brush and made footsteps, and shot our plates there, which was really nice. And Mike said, "So what are you gonna do next?" And I said, "Well, I'm gonna go down to New Zealand again because they called me for King Kong because they're remaking King Kong." He's like, "Really? New Zealand, interesting," he said. And he arrived in New Zealand, I think, 2 months after I did. So it's a bit my fault, I guess, that he came down here and he stayed at Weta the whole time. I think he retired 2 years ago.
Oh, wow.
And as far as I know, he lives now in Australia, just at the beach, and enjoys his retirement. Yeah.
Nice. Nice.
And,
but you've been at New Zealand since then, right?
Yeah.
So you've been there, 15 plus years now?
I came November 2004. What is that now? Math. Oh my God.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
So 20 years. Almost 20 years.
Well, no, eight. We're going up to 18 years.
18 years, yeah.
So
wow.
It's 17 and a bit. Yeah, it went quicker. Yeah, I came down here, and I loved working at Weta. And King Kong was great. I also got to work with Mike, and we did basically the paintings for Skull Island.
Mm-hmm.
He did all the hero paintings, and I kind of I also helped him clean up his stuff, and I also did my own paintings too, which was a great experience. It was really, really nice.
Nice.
And stayed then, and yeah, New Zealand for me has been home ever since. I love it here.
Right.
It's a great country, and it's with weather here. You get to work on leading edge stuff.
Yeah.
And I got to work on King Kong, and then we did Avatar.
Yep.
It's funny. I watched a bunch of your podcasts over the time, and somebody mentioned the T-shirt from 1997, the first Avatar T-shirt. Was it? God, it was a virtual production podcast. Anyway, very interesting. And he said, "Oh yeah." So I still have the T-shirt too. It was nice to get then finally.
Yeah, because Avatar was floating around DD way back in '97, right?
Yeah, because I think Jim wrote the script. It's like, okay, do you want to do CG? Let's see if we can do this. Let's challenge you a little bit.
Right.
And they looked at the script, and I think the gist of it was technically not feasible
right.
yet, because the animation capabilities were just not there. We're still working with Silicon graphics machines. It was just all that stuff.
Yeah.
Was just in the beginning.
256 megs of RAM is probably about as much as you had, right?
Yeah, that was about the standard back then. When I first started, it was 96.
96
it was crazy,
megs.
And 100 megahertz.
Yeah.
So it was nice to kind of be part of the conclusion.
Yeah.
On Avatar, and it was, they really went in feet first. With Jim's immaculate preparation.
Sure.
And then Weta and Joe and everybody just really taking the challenge head on. And it was funny too, because at first we always, in the matte painting department, we were like 4 or 5 people.
Sure.
Brenton Cotman was there. Do you know Brenton Cotman?
Who's that?
Brenton Cotman. He was at DD for a bit, but it might have been after you.
Okay.
There was I think it was the Speed Racer days.
Oh, right.
Was there.
Yeah.
And a great guy, and a really, really talented guy. And we're like, oh, Avatar, and they always told us, no matte paintings on Avatar. It's all gonna be rendered. No matte paintings. You guys just, look, this is now the matte painter's view of it. I'm sure there were reasons and all that. But we're so hungry for those environments. We saw all that beautiful concept arts of floating islands. If you wanna catch a matte painter, you put a floating island in a trap, and you catch 5 of them.
Yeah.
and so then, but we're like, yeah, well, do you guys need to help us out a little bit? It was mostly also the end battle. And we ended up doing 300 shots, which is unheard of. And Brenton and I kind of developed a pipeline to be able to work in stereo, which wasn't that bad.
Of course.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we did the background. Yeah, we never came far in the foreground because that was all rendered, and I think that's exactly how you sometimes still should do it, because you want to concentrate your firepower, where it matters.
Yep.
And so we worked with Vue back then. I don't know.
I do remember Vue.
Yeah. Which was the only software that could do some kind of procedural ecosystem of placement of objects, basically.
Sure.
So they had some trees, and it gave us what we needed. So we got the layout geo. We either did that or kit bashed some more stuff on top.
Yeah.
Build our ecosystem, render that, and then use that as a render basis, and then reproject it again for the 3D shot. Then and rendered it through 2 eyes.
Yeah.
It was fairly simple but effective.
Yeah.
And that's how we ended up. I think I myself did around 40 shots.
Okay.
Which was
that's quite a bit.
Highlights would be the big gas giant that hangs in the sky.
Yep.
I did that one. I remember too there was a review, and I looked at the tape later, and they also, of course, in parallel had another studio paint a gas giant.
Mm-hmm.
And they both had him up on the screen, and Jim went like, went back and forth, and the other one looked pretty good too, and he's like, yeah, I don't like this here, but if I had to go with one right now, I'll go with this one. and it was mine. I was like, yes. and I did pretty much a lot of those planter shots. Also, where he flies off on that big beast, that big red beast at the end. There's like a sun. I did that one.
Nice.
And a couple of other things. So the planet I did a lot, and also then just battle shots, and it was a really cool team, I have to say. That kind of just dropped in like people, because they're like, okay, there are matte paintings on Avatar now, so they poured in the artists.
Yeah.
And there was quite nice to be able to rise to the occasion.
That's awesome. Yeah. That's awesome. Now you're currently you've been doing some work as a visual effects art director. So explain a little bit what a visual effects art director is and what kind of stuff you're doing.
Yeah, I quickly can continue the timeline with I left by the end of 2010 and 2011. It was kind of, they didn't, in all honesty, they didn't renew my contract. I'd been there for a while, and I also was going through some personal challenges.
Okay.
In all honesty, so I couldn't live up to my full potential.
Sure.
I got mentioned when my contract wouldn't be renewed, so I'm like, okay.
Okay.
Incidentally, that was the day my contract ended too.
Okay.
But so I went back to the matte painter room. I was like, well, guys, I guess I don't see you anymore. And my good friend Nick said, you know what, I think I've got something for you. My friend Charlie is a VFX soup, and he's looking for a VFX art director.
Okay.
Like, oh, really? So they were doing the television series Spartacus. I don't know if you've ever heard of it.
Okay, yeah.
Like a very bloodthirsty and sexy show, whatever. In Auckland, Rob Tappert was producing that. He's the original producer of The Evil Dead, and then he did Army of Darkness, and he did Xena and Hercules and all that. And he was one of the first people, or he actually was the first one producing in New Zealand, because Xena and Hercules were shot in New Zealand.
Yep.
And all the people I'm working with right now on the production side, the older goats, so to say, they all have their roots in Hercules and Xena. So that's really somebody who also should be mentioned next to Peter Jackson is Rob Tappert.
Interesting.
Who started producing before Peter did, I guess, or or maybe at the same time, but in Auckland, and established the industry there. So he did Spartacus, and they were looking for. It was the third season. They were looking for a visual effects art director, because they shot it all on green. They never went outside. It was all shot in studio. Okay. So they needed an enormous amount of material and control over what would be in those shots. And we had episodes, between 200 was a small episode. I think the series finale had 1,000 shots in one episode. And for 2012, that wasn't bad, for TV. It was
it's a lot for TV. Yeah.
And also, you made compromises, but it, we did our best.
Right.
And so I went from matte painting and being all downtrodden, found myself, in a helicopter shooting photographs over the White Island, which is a volcanic island in front of the coast. Right. And so for me, actually, it was an epiphany, because as much as I love being a matte painter, and I'm a bit of I like doing more than that. Not that I've mastered matte painting, sure. Not at all. But my interest is also in photography, and I do have a background in photography.
Yeah.
And also being finally on the production side, and what an eye opener that is. Mm-hmm. And so it was, for me, I was really lucky that out of this kind of not that easy situation, I landed there, and my boss Charlie McClellan, who was also one of the founding people of Weta Digital in the very early days. I think he was around for the Frighteners and things like that.
Right.
He's from the States. was a great boss, and we really found which areas I could fill in, and he also once again taught me a lot, and was really generous with helping me fulfill that role. And what a visual effects art director does is, I mean, it depends on the production, but basically, when you're a visual effects artist and you work on a shot and it's like, how is this supposed to look? Why are we, is there any reference? And then you open up a directory somewhere on the server and you have 800 PDF files that are just like construction drawings that you don't know what to look at. There was always a disconnect between production and post-production, where the production designer, designs the show, and then once the shooting is done, they usually let him go or her go. And post-production is left with a directory full with stuff that, nobody knows what to do with. So as a visual effects art director, you advise, I would say there's a post role, but there's also a production role, which I've just done. But the post role is that you're still on, in production, you interact with the art department, and you're the conduit between the art department and the visual effects department, and try to have that information flow as good as it can, and also you're responsible for doing an interpretation from the art department to the visual effects department, what is relevant, and
right.
and trying to filter that out. And it's mostly a also, as it was on Spartacus, and then in some, it's a communications role.
Mm-hmm.
You really have to know where to go in the art department, and it's its very own animal, and find the right information, and also know what is important, and what is important for the time when the art department doesn't exist anymore.
Right.
So I always compared as a stupid, but making preserves for the cold winter, when they need it and you can break it open.
Sure.
Say, it's good that I took 2,800 photos of that set because now we need it, or
right.
other things. So I always also shoot a lot of reference with a visual effects eye, but not texture reference, but bigger reference,
Sure.
and Lego bricks that you can then, it's like, they changed the script. Now we need to reconstruct this, that you have enough material. Of course, now you have photogrammetry, and if it's a big show, a big vendor comes in and scans everything, the whole stage, including the toilets, you can do it all. But for Spartacus, it was a quite wide role, and communication and getting the visual input into the department.
Right.
And I did that role again for a TV series called Marco Polo.
Oh yeah.
There was a Netflix show, so we
It's a
shot
great
5
show,
months.
actually. It's a really good show.
Yeah, it was. It got the 2-season treatment by Netflix, and then it kind of went away. I think it was. It was
really
too.
good. Yeah, I love Marco Polo. Yeah.
And we shot in Malaysia. Pinewood sold their studio system, and they built Pinewood, Malaysia. It's just above Singapore, and there were brand new stages that we moved into, and was a really interesting time in Malaysia too. And so I gained like 5 kilos because I loved the food so much. It was terrible.
Nice.
And there were. It was a nice experience. And then the year after, we shot in Hungary.
Oh,
We went to
nice.
Hungary.
Yep.
And which was also nice on a personal note because
Right
my
next to
mom-
Austria.
yeah, my mom had cancer, and
Oh, sorry, man.
so I didn't spend one weekend in Budapest. I just jumped in a train on a Friday night and drove to Vienna. I think it's about 2 hours.
Mm-hmm.
And spent the weekends with her, and it was good because that was the most time I got to spend with her,
Mm-hmm.
because ever since I had left Austria, and ever since she died in 2017, so lucky that way. So when I
Right.
think of Hungary, I always think about her. But it was a good production, and also what I started there, which we get into then, is it was 2015. I had a drone, and I started doing photogrammetry of locations
Oh, nice. Okay.
already, just that helped me out. Really, it was still, I think, what did I use? I think it was Photoscan, and there was still a GoPro on it. You know, it was a smaller production, and every initiative that I did, I paid for myself basically, and was me. You know, nobody else. But that's where I went like, this is pretty cool. So you can basically take a chunk of location and take it home and work with that.
Yep.
And that's what I did a lot with the current project. Not only so, what I'm still working on right now is that big Amazon project that they did in New Zealand.
Got it.
With a franchise that is quite known in New Zealand. Is quite known for.
Yes.
It's the Lord of the Rings TV series. We can say that.
Yeah.
I think I have to be fairly careful with what I say. As
sure.
You know.
You don't have to tell me a thing.
No,
but
I think it's we can talk a little bit about the procedure and all that without going into any specifics. But it was the thickest NDA I've ever signed.
Right.
And it was I started September 2019, so it was I haven't been on a job for that long as a freelancer in
wow.
ever since I went freelance.
Wow.
And it was really an amazing experience, though.
Wow.
Through a turn of circumstances, I did not end up in the visual effects department as I usually did, but in the art department.
Oh, nice. Okay.
And that was first. I'm like, oh, I hope this is gonna work out. But it was amazing because I got to learn all the art department stuff.
Right.
Procedures, and just what the art department is. And
sure.
And you know, if you haven't been in a department, you think you kind of know what it is and all that, but you don't know all the minutiae and the terminology and just how it works. You know how the sets are created, and that's also where I met a lot of architects again, or
right.
ex-architects, and really interesting. So I got to work with set designers and with the art directors. Guiding them, and I insisted to sit with the art directors. They were like, "Oh, you want a dark corner somewhere?" I'm like, "No, I guess I'm an art director, so I want to sit with the art directors," which is a decision that really paid off because I could just see how they work and hopefully, you know, make friends with them and help them out, and that's what I tried doing. And it took the first couple of months to find my footing because. They're like, great, you're here. What now? So, but what ended up being is that I worked mostly for the production designer, Ramsey, who was a great guy. There was a bit of a change of guard, and he basically came in 4 months late and then had to catch up the whole time. Because another person had left the position and he came in. So I don't think he ever slept. He was just on fire. And he first was I just showed him what I could do. So I did some concept art and then I started already. I use Adobe Medium a lot for like organic sculpting and all that.
Right.
Which is a great tool. And pretty soon, also pretty much 2 years ago, started introducing Unreal into our workflow. And that worked really well. So what we ended up doing then, and I ended up, we were 4 people in the end. That was my team. I would go on recce and all that, and then come back and scan the location. And then take that back, we'd put it in Unreal, you know, we get all the other elements and you get a full preview of your set. You have the time of day, and then also start building the visual effects extension around it. So you have now that flow I described before from the art department to visual effects in a much more concrete way. And I guess that this is where I stopped going into detail. But I thought it worked really well, and I learned a lot. I also went in the 3rd cohort of the Unreal Fellowship.
Oh yeah, you were on the fellowship. Yeah.
Yeah, which was basically I kind of tried to get in, it didn't work out, and then 2 days before I started, I got the go-ahead. Said, no, we can take you in with this one. So I had to tell everybody that I said I would work half days, which I did.
Right.
And also, it's a West Coast timeline. So, but I was in New Zealand, so I had to get up at 4:30 for the first lessons.
Right.
And then I would do the lessons, and then we would do lab. And then around noon, I would go to work. And then I'd work on the production till like 7 at night, come home, work on the project again, and then somewhere go to sleep. At the end, I was like, oh, I can't wait till this is over.
Yeah.
But it was a really cool experience. It supercharged my abilities and my understanding.
Yeah.
It was also beneficial for our production, I think, and with that, massive download that I received.
I mean, do you think that because, obviously what you've done with Unreal and obviously some of the things that you've done both as a visual effects person and as an art department, do you think there's going to be a blend or there's blurred lines between art departments and visual effects now much more because of tools like that are coming into play?
I would say so, technically, but the function of an art department is a bit different than visual effects. They're really constructing things, and a production designer designing a world is quite a different animal than but then on the visual effects side,
Right.
Visual effects is very plate centered.
Right.
Whereas if you're on the production design side, you'll still have sets, and there's a functionality that we never have to think about. It's like, this wall needs to come out. It's like, that's great that you made this, but where's the crew coming in?
Right.
We need to get the scissor lift in there.
Right.
Like, you put a rock in the way, great. So, of course, with the whole virtual production and all this will blend, but there will still be, as we know, the LED volume is no magic wand and no magic bullet. That's so there will, if you can build a set or at least foreground and all this, this will be done by a production designer, because there are so many rules that visual effects people never encounter.
Sure.
And just because they're not exposed to it and they don't have to. But so that blending, of course, it's gonna come close. I think what I'm working on right now and what kind of my desire is to develop a workflow where nothing gets thrown away. Because quite often, things get worked out, then they get handed off, it gets lost. It's like, oh, let's reinvent the wheel again, because, it's
sure.
The person who did it before is not here anymore. So to really have a flow of design, you start out with some loose sketches, then you do blocking, then, it goes to a concept artist who's using the same thing, it comes back, and that asset ideally should travel all the way into visual effects production. We kind of managed it on this side recently, but to have the opportunity to go in and before the production starts and say, hey, this is what we're gonna try, I think would be very good. I think it would be beneficial for both sides in creating some shortcuts and also getting a loop,
feedback loop.
If something doesn't work for visual effects, they can still kick it back in the previous phase and say, hey, can you guys do this, And if this is a common pipeline and structure, that would be enormously beneficial.
Sure.
That also, I think if you just look at what's being created in the art department, how much art and how much information is created, and how a lot of it, I'm not blaming anyone, that's just how it, but how a lot of it gets lost often because of whatever reasons. Nobody says, oh, we don't care about the artwork. It's just, production is a mad battle. So,
sure.
And if you can channel that a little bit better, I think that would be really good. And people are doing this already. It's not like that it's, I came up with this, but I would like to be part of something with the experience I just had and still having to really get it right.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's very exciting, Peter. It's very exciting what you're doing. It's also awesome to see you again, man. By the way, you haven't changed at all in 20 years. You look exactly the same, which is amazing. So it's really great to see you and to talk about that. We've been over an hour, but it's an incredible history that you gave us, this amazing lesson that I've learned, and amazing people you've been around. And it's really kind of cool. I think what you're doing in the art department is fascinating. I can't wait to see where that's going to go, and I really can't wait to see this big Amazon show whenever that happens come out. So
Yeah, it's coming. It's coming. I think it's going to be big.
Yeah.
It was quite an experience working on it, and as I said, just a fantastic team.
For sure.
And to be able, and also being given the freedom to tackle something like this. You know, the production designer might have said, no, I'm not interested or whatever, but he really embraced it. And then also, in conclusion, all that stuff went also to visual effects, and I'm now on the visual effects side.
Yeah.
And a lot of the stuff that we worked out, we're using now on this side, and it helps us forward.
Yeah, and
it makes it more coherent.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you know where it came from, right? It has you understand the motivation behind what the decisions were made, right?
Exactly, because it's one thing I also wanted to say in contrast. You know, when you're just a visual effects artist, and like as a matte painter, and you paint, and I think I knew everything. Oh, I did the shoot it this way and all this. You know, you have no idea before you go out and get to look in some other spots. So I'm really thankful that I got to do this, and we'll see where it goes next.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, thanks, Peter. It's awesome talking to you.
Great seeing you, Chris. Well, really, thanks for hitting me up for that. It was nice to reminisce a little bit, and I'll be watching.